All right, good day, everyone. My name is Adam Ludwin, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Chain. We're going to get started. Thank you to everyone for joining this special webcast. We're going to be introducing and demonstrating Chain's new product called Sequence. So I'm Adam, the CEO, and I'm joined by Devon Gundry, our Chief Product Officer and my co-founder. I'm going to go ahead and give an overview first at a high level of what Sequence is, and then Devon is going to do a live demo of the service showing just how easy it is to implement a mobile wallet on top of Sequence. So let's dive in. On behalf of the team at Chain, I'm pleased to introduce Sequence. Sequence is a secure ledger service for modern software teams. Said another way, Sequence is for any application that manages balances. So it's a hosted ledger that makes it really easy and safe to build, operate, and scale services like mobile wallets, lending products, marketplaces. So, for example, ride-sharing apps or other two-sided marketplaces, cryptocurrency exchanges, fundraising sites, gift programs, asset managers, insurance platforms, and so on. Really, any application that tracks and manages balances for its users, whether those balances are currencies, securities, loans, coupons, credits, cryptocurrencies, prepaid minutes, really any type of balance, if they're managed by the application, then that application is a candidate for using Sequence. So let me tell you why we built Sequence. At a high level, it's because balances are now everywhere. It used to be that balances mostly just lived at your bank. So here's a picture of the homepage of Wells Fargo, and around that homepage you can see every single startup that is building a competing product to one of the services offered and listed just on the homepage of Wells Fargo. So collectively, this phenomenon around fintech is referred to as bank unbundling. And the implication of unbundling is that balances are now everywhere. They're not just at banks anymore. And every one of these emerging products that you see listed here, as well as thousands of others, of course, are not well served by the ledger systems that would normally power a bank. There's a category called core banking software, and that's what most banks use to manage the balances of, say, checking accounts or savings accounts or loans. But core banking systems really aren't designed for emerging fintech companies. Instead, what ends up happening is that most of the services you see here will end up building their own custom ledger, their own back-end infrastructure. But here's the problem. Building ledger infrastructure from scratch is really no easy task, and it's really not a good use of engineers' time that could be better spent focused on the application, the differentiating features of a service. And a complete solution is a lot more than just a database. To have a ledger stack that supports an application like a mobile wallet or a lending platform, you need several things. You need authentication security, transaction logic, event logging, of course databases and all the database management, integrations into reporting and analytics systems, and not to mention building a clean interface into that stack itself. And as a company scales, securing that ledger stack becomes hard, and a difficult choice emerges. Either make the ledger a fortress, which typically bottlenecks product development and slows things down, or optimize for moving quickly and then just hope for the best that accepting that ledger fragility and security are just a cost of doing business. The net result is a huge engineering burden that is just maintaining undifferentiated infrastructure, not even the core part of the company's product or strategy. So that, in essence, is why we built Sequence, to let modern software teams focus on shipping and scaling their product instead of building and maintaining ledger infrastructure. So what exactly is Sequence? We call it a ledger as a service. And really that means it's four things in one. First of all, of course, it is a type of database, a database for balances that has an append-only structure designed specifically for managing financial instruments. It's also a real-time transaction engine or virtual machine that validates every transaction that affects a balance in that database. In addition, it's a cryptographic authentication system that provides fine-grained access control to the ledger and authenticates every single transaction that's added to the ledger. And fourth, it is your system of record. In other words, it's a golden record of all transactions, all balances, and all history that can serve to create accurate reports and real-time analytics. And that entire set of functionality is neatly managed as an easy-to-use cloud service for developers. In other words, it's managed in the cloud, accessed via APIs and SDKs. So taken together, what do we get? First of all, a unified system of record for all the balances and all the accounts in your application, such that different teams and systems and even third-party organizations can securely write to the ledger and read from it using that key-based authentication system I talked about. It's a very simple developer experience, as we'll see in a moment, to implement, operate, and extend your platform, your product on top of Sequence. And it's relatively low cost as compared to building and operating a comparable system yourself. Simply put, Sequence allows your team to both move fast and break nothing, a combination that you very rarely find when you build something like this yourself. So before we get into the demo, let me just address a few questions that may be on your mind from this brief introduction. The first is, just how fast is Sequence? If it's a cloud ledger and it's append only and it has these cryptographic properties, do I have to worry about performance? And the answer is no, it's extremely fast. In its sort of basic configuration, can handle several hundred transactions per second with sub 50 millisecond latency, and at more performant configurations can achieve thousands of transactions per second. Second question you might be wondering, is Sequence a blockchain? After all, Chain is well known as a blockchain company. Is this a blockchain? Well, the underlying data model that I described is an append-only ledger where every transaction has to be signed by the key that controls the relevant balance, which means that the internal data structure is technically a blockchain. But this is a cloud service, and it's a service for building and operating traditional software applications. It's not a decentralized protocol or system, which is why we don't use the term blockchain in our marketing. It's really a technical feature. You might be wondering, is this accounting software? No, not in the strict sense of creating financial statements like balance sheets and income statements. Think of it this way. Every company needs an accounting system, but not every company is managing balances for its users. Sequence is for the latter category of companies. I referred to core banking earlier, so is Sequence a core banking system? Well, Sequence, again, is a ledger that stores, tracks, and transacts balances, but it's not meant to replace each and every feature that a typical core banking solution would offer, because those solutions map to every feature a bank has, from checking and savings accounts to lending and mortgages, even ATMs. This is a point solution designed to be a ledger as a service. Finally, how much does Sequence cost? It depends on your scale, but we target price points with customers that aim to be less than half of what they would normally pay to maintain and build their own system. So it's meant to be extremely cost effective. So with that, let's see it in action. So I'm going to hand it over to Devon, my co-founder, in a minute, to show how easy it is to implement a mobile wallet on Sequence. So we built a demo called Super Wallet, and it's an actual application, not a simulation. The money isn't real, but the application is. And as you'll see, it embeds the Sequence SDK and is connected to a live instance of Sequence. It's 100% built on Sequence. There's no additional database behind the scenes that's running. And we built it in 3 days. 2 engineers put this together in the last 3 days. So it's very quick and easy to build on top of this platform. So as you're watching the demo, a few things to look out for. watch as Sequence manages all of these different types of transactions, from account creation to deposits and withdrawals to merchants being paid and paying fees. You'll see peer-to-peer transfers. You'll see loyalty points being earned and redeemed, and you'll even see currency exchange. What you won't see is something that's happening behind the scenes, which is the cryptographic keys that are part of the SuperWallet system that are signing every single transaction, whether that be a deposit or withdrawal, or a transfer, or an exchange. And just recall and remember that the basic security model of Sequence is that private keys control every asset in an account. But we won't pause to show that happening in the interest of time. But just keep that in the back of your mind as you watch the demo. So with that, I will turn it over to Devon and let him show you Sequence in action.
Great, thanks, Adam. All right, so what you see on the screen here is two actually web browsers. On the left, this is the SuperWallet demo application that we built over the last 3 days. It is a Ruby app. It is running the Sequence Ruby SDK, and it connects to Sequence to do all of the actions that we're going to show you in this demo. On the right side is the Sequence dashboard. This is the dashboard that your team would log into when developing, working on your application. It provides a handful of different UIs that make development, prototyping, modeling, and debugging very straightforward. So as we do the demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back and forth between the SuperWallet application and the Sequence dashboard so that we can see how different actions in the wallet application are actually accessing and writing to and reading from the Sequence ledger. I'll click over here on the right side. This is the Explorer. So I'm in the production ledger of the wallet demo. This is the ledger that this application here on the left side is connecting to. Let's start with creating a new account. So on our SuperWallet application, we're just going to create a new account for Alice. When we click Sign Up, what we're going to notice is we create an account and we're dropped into our wallet. This is Alice's wallet view. It shows that she has $0 and 0 points and no transaction activity. But what we actually did when the application just created that account, we'll switch over to Sequence and we'll click our Accounts tab. And we'll notice that there's actually a new account called Alice. This is our Alice account. And so when the application created the Alice account, it went to Sequence and it created the actual Sequence account that's going to hold and manage her balances in Sequence. If we click into the account, we can take just a quick look behind the scenes. And you'll notice one field here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but each account has a free-form user-supplied text field we call tags. And so right now we're using this tag to say the type of account is a consumer. And we'll see how we use that to differentiate, for example, from a merchant account, which we're going to see in a little while. It's also worth noting that the reason that our application here, the wallet on the left side, says $0 is because it's actually, the application is actually connecting to Sequence when that page loads and asking for what are the balances in Alice's account, and Sequence is returning that there are no dollars and there are also no points, as we'll see in a minute. And on the activity view, there are also no transactions because Alice hasn't done anything yet. So let's actually take a look at our first transaction that we can do. So you would imagine that in a wallet application, the first step is a user would need to cash in, deposit some funds into the wallet. So we'll go to our menu here, and we'll say deposit cash. Now, obviously, this is not real cash, so we're simulating what would happen in an actual wallet application. But in this screen, we assume that Alice has connected her bank account, big bank checking account, and she's going to do a deposit of 100 USD, $100. And you can imagine that this would be doing an ACH withdrawal from her account to bring that $100 into the application, and will be reflected in the sequence ledger. So we'll say we're going to deposit $100. We're going to click deposit, and what we'll do is we'll look over at our ledger. And so first, actually, let's look at the activity. On our screen here, we'll see that now Alice has a $100 balance. She still has 0 points because we didn't issue any points, but she has one effectively transaction, one activity item here that says, Alice, you made a deposit of $100. So if we switch over to our sequence dashboard, we're actually going to see this top transaction here. It happened just a few seconds ago. This is our sequence transaction in which we actually gave Alice her $100 in the sequence ledger. A transaction contains one or more actions, and we'll see that this transaction has a single action, which is the issue action. We issued an amount of an asset to a destination account, which was Alice. So let's talk really quickly about what that asset actually is, and then we can look at the rest of the fields in this transaction. All types of balances in sequence are called assets. So when we want to model that USD exists in someone's account, moves between accounts, is paid to merchants, first thing that we actually did when we created this application is we went and we set up an asset. So we click our Assets tab, and we'll see there's actually 2 assets in the ledger. There's the USD asset, which is going to represent USD, and there's actually a points asset, which I know we saw on the original screen that Alice has 0 points, but that's a distinct, discrete type of balance. That's obviously, those are 2 different types of balances that we want to manage here. And so each of those are modeled in sequence as a different asset type. And so when we create a transaction, we have the ability to do an issuance action. Now, issue means that we can put units of that asset into the ledger. And once we have those assets into the ledger, now we can actually move those units between accounts, which we're going to see in just a second. But we have this first issuance transaction where we issued $100. Now, it's worth noting here that you notice that the amount is actually 100 followed by 2 zeros. And that's because as you're modeling your application, when you create an asset, a type of balance that you want to track, you have to decide what the fundamental unit of that asset is. And so our fundamental unit is cents in this. So it's actually really not 100 USD, it's really 10,000 cents. So you'll be seeing those 2 extra zeros in all of the examples we do, but you can see how the application, the wallet application on the left side actually translates that as $100.00. If we click into our transaction, we get details about the transaction, but there's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. One is the reference data. So every single transaction has a set of user-supplied fields called reference data. And that reference data can be used to annotate transactions in any format that your application needs to effectively query, make sense of, display those transactions in your application. And so you'll see that our reference data here, we decided in this application to say the type of transaction is a deposit. And you'll notice if you look back over to the application, the wallet application, it says you made a deposit. And the reason this application knows to say you made a deposit is because it's looking at the reference data on the transaction and seeing that it's of type deposit. So it can interpret that to display it directly on the screen. So this wallet application is actually just grabbing that transaction and interpreting it on the screen. We also did 2 additional fields, which is how you might think about tying external payment systems or any type of external system into your sequence ledger. And so we said the system that we used to deposit, imaginary in this sense, of course, was ACH, and then we could include the ACH transaction ID. So this is a great way to tie together external systems, their IDs, so that you can actually trace payments all the way through from external systems all through the sequence ledger, and obviously run queries and run reports on that after the fact. So we'll scroll back up, go back to our transactions view, and I'm going to show a few more actions. The second thing that we want to do is we want to say, okay, well, Alice has some USD. What can she do with this? I'm going to switch over to another kind of view of this demo application. So you can imagine this is a totally different app. This is a food ordering service app. And Alice has put together an order at Quick Eats. She's ordered some items. She has a total that she owes. And so you can imagine if a wallet application it would be a supported type of payment in this food service application, Alice might be able to pay with SuperWallet. So when we decide to pay with SuperWallet here on Alice's phone, we'll click SuperWallet, and you'll notice what we did here is we immediately, the SuperWallet kind of module inside of here, accessed the ledger, and it asked the ledger, what are Alice's balances? And it saw that Alice has enough cash to satisfy this entire total. So the $37.38 is the total, and we see in gray below that, oh, she can pay $37.38 with her cash balance. So when we decide to finally pay this, we're actually going to use that cash balance, and we can take a look at the resulting transaction. So we hit pay, and we get a success screen. And we'll notice something new, which is we earned 37 points, 37 SuperWallet points back for making this payment at the merchant. And so let's actually switch over to our sequence ledger. And what we're going to see here is a new transaction. Now you're going to notice that this new transaction is a bit different from our previous transaction. The previous transaction had one action, but this has 3 actions. And all 3 of these actions are basically 3 different parts of an atomic update to the ledger. It is an all-or-nothing transaction that can tie together many different assets moving across many different accounts. So let's actually step through those actions. The first action that we did is that we transferred. We transferred $37.38 from Alice's account to Quick Eats. That was covering the payment. Satisfied that, great, they're going to deliver her food. The second action that we did is that we transferred 74 cents from Quick Eats to SuperWallet. And so in this application, we actually modeled that a merchant has to pay a fee to SuperWallet for every single time that you check out with your SuperWallet. And so we're actually able to capture and record that fee perfectly in this single ledger update. And then the last action is we actually issued 37 points back to Alice's account. And so what's really great about this is if you really think about it from the point standpoint, usually managing point systems are a completely separate system from the cash ledger, but because points are just another type of asset, another type of balance that you want to manage, we can do this in sequence all in one tidy little package called a transaction. And you can think about how after the fact you would be able to query this, you'd be able to run reports, and you'd be able to explicitly tie every single points issuance to the payment that occurred and the amount of cash that was spent, for example. And in this, we're giving 37 points because they spent $37 and they got a point per dollar. So let's take a look at one more transaction with Alice. We'll switch back to Alice's wallet here, and what we'll refresh her wallet view, and we're going to see that transaction show up. Once again, it's worth noting that our balance has changed. That's because the wallet is querying her balance and sees the new updated balance. It sees that she now has points, and it also sees that transaction where she paid Quick Eats. And just like we were interpreting the reference data to know that the first was a deposit, we interpret the reference data to know that this was a payment at a merchant. So the last thing we can do is we can pay a friend, another common feature of a wallet. So Alice is friends with Bob, and she'll choose to pay Bob $10. So when we click Pay Bob, we're once again going to switch over to our sequence ledger, and we're going to see a couple of things. We're going to see that we have a new transaction in the ledger. We're going to see that that transaction has a single action of transfer in which we transfer $10, once again, that 1,000 cents, from the source account, Alice, to the destination account, Bob. And now at this point, those balances will be in Bob's account. So we can actually look, if we click into this transaction and we say, let's go take a look at Bob's account, This looks familiar. We saw Alice's account before with the type consumer, but now we can take a look at Bob's balances. And so let's actually switch over to Bob's wallet screen, and so we can take a look at how they compare across the two. We'll log into Bob's account. And we're going to see where Alice paid you $10. That was that previous transaction. And so first thing I want to show you is if we go from in the sequence dashboard, if we go from Bob's account, we click transactions. This is actually showing you a query. And it's worth noting here that Sequence has a query language that allows you to effectively slice and cut and look at transactions, balances, assets in any different way that you need to for your application. So in this query here, we say that we want to see any transaction where Bob was the source account, right, from a transfer, or Bob was the destination account, maybe from an issuance or a transfer. And so it filters our list down to just those 3 transactions. And you'll notice how there's 3 transactions in Sequence, and that's because on the screen, on the Super Wallet screen, you have those 3 transactions, that's the exact query that it's running there to get all of those details. The last transaction that we can do is going to be our most complicated one, and it's an interesting one because we're going to actually move more assets in more actions than we ever have before. So let's actually go to Bob's checkout view. So you can imagine Bob is using that same food delivery service application. He makes an order, same order as Alice, because they're good friends and they eat the same thing. We have this Pay with Super Wallet button. We click Pay with Super Wallet, and you're going to notice something a little bit different here, which is the total obviously is still $37.38. But the Super Wallet module here went out to the Sequence ledger to check Bob's balances, and you can see that Bob actually had 900 points available to spend, and this merchant will accept those points. And so at a penny a point, those 900 points are worth $9. So in this transaction we're going to pay with points and cash balance. So we'll hit pay. We'll come back over to our Sequence ledger, and we'll see also on our confirmation of our wallet that we earned 28 points because we did spend some cash, and so we didn't get the total amount of the bill back in points, but we got points for whatever cash we spent. And so if we look here at our Sequence ledger, we can see this is our first transaction with 4 actions. So our first action was transfer. We transferred the points, those 900 points, from Bob's account to the Quick Eats account. We then transferred the remaining balance of the cash asset, which was $28.38, from Bob to Quick Eats. We handled, as we saw before, our fee, where Quick Eats needs to pay 56 cents to the Super Wallet. And then for the cash, that $28 that Bob did spend from his cash balance, he got 28 points back in return. And those were all wrapped up in that one single tidy atomic transaction on the ledger.
This is really cool. So a couple of questions. The first is, are each of these transactions signed by the relevant keys for those parts of the system?
Yeah, great question. As Adam mentioned before, every transaction in the ledger needs to be signed with cryptographic keys. The way that you define what keys sign what types of transactions is really up to how you would design your system. In this Super Wallet application, I can actually show you. We assumed that there were effectively 4 different types of services in this application. There is the treasury service that's really responsible for taking in ACH deposits. There's the loyalty service, which is responsible for issuing points. There's the merchant and consumer that manages their different types of accounts. And so, when we created our accounts and we created our assets, we created them from one of these keys. And therefore, when you create a transaction, you actually have to sign that transaction with the corresponding key.
So this is a way to ensure, for example, your treasury microservice can't mess with your loyalty balances. And your loyalty service, maybe even if that's a third party, can still interact with the ledger, but not impede in any way the sort of critical functionality of deposits and withdrawals, but still have a shared ledger or a single sort of unified ledger across all of those.
Absolutely. It specifically cryptographically limits the authority that any one system can have, and it scopes it down to exactly what they're supposed to do and nothing else.
So keys for access control, but also authentication. So every transaction is signed, and then those signed transactions get added directly and appended directly onto the ledger.
Yeah, and it's probably worth just pointing out that one thing that's different about a cryptographic ledger is that in a traditional type of system, you might authenticate a system, and once you've authenticated that system, you make sure that that system can perform a particular function. And then some system is actually responsible for updating the database. In a cryptographic ledger, it's a little bit different because transactions are actually self-authenticating. If they're signed by the proper key, they are guaranteed to be valid, and they can be inserted directly into the ledger.
And it's also worth mentioning that each of these keys could actually represent a multi-signature key. So the loyalty system isn't probably literally one key, but a set of keys, both for redundancy, but also for extra security, right?
Exactly.
So, all right, so this was pre-built. All the functionality, all the transactions you just demonstrated were something you had prepared in advance. Given that we have some time, why don't we do something a little brave and do some real-time application development? For example, what would it look like if, say, the sort of product manager for SuperWallet showed up and said, hey, we want to expand to Europe, and we got to get there by next month. So let's add, euros to this application. How long would that take? And what would that look like if we wanted to add euros and add that sort of functionality, that new asset type, to this service?
Great. Let's do that. So I think the first thing that we would do is we would think about our assets model. Let's click our assets tab in the sequence ledger, and we have these two existing assets, USD and points, but we're talking about modeling a new asset, euro. Let's just click into our USD really quickly, and we can take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. This is the format of our USD asset. It's got a set of tags which allow the application effectively to identify how to display it, what currency symbol to display. So we can actually take this information here, and we can create a new asset, and let's do it with a code EUR instead of USD. So we go to the Explorer here and click New Asset.
And can I interrupt and ask you a question?
Yeah.
You're actually interacting with Sequence directly through this visual interface.
Yeah.
But I could also do this directly through the SDK.
Yeah, exactly. So depending on if your asset setup is like a one-time thing, then probably you're going to want to do it in the interface. If you're creating assets, you're creating accounts like we are in the wallet application, you're going to be doing all these actions with the SDK. And as we do these couple examples here, you'll see that there's a black box on the right side that has the SDK example, and this is actually showing you in Ruby the code that is running behind the scenes to accomplish what we want to do.
Great.
Okay, so let's create our new asset. We're going to give it an alias EUR for euro. We're going to give it some tags here. Let's change this to EUR. So we're following that same format of as our USD asset, but we're calling it a euro asset now. We can scroll down. This is where we had those keys. And as we looked at, we had those different types of keys for different systems. Since this is going to be issuing the euro asset, we're going to give that control to the treasury.
And issuing, again, is like minting units, basically, right?
Yeah.
So if you take an issuance is something you might do if you get a deposit.
Exactly. Yeah. When you do a deposit, you take points into the system.
Cool.
So we'll issue our euro here in just a second. Okay. So we've created our new asset. You can see the code that is going to be creating that on the right side. Everything that we're translating in this form is really just fields in the SDK. We're using our treasury key. We're putting our tags in. And as Adam said before, you can have multiple keys. We're just doing one and requiring one signature, but you could have two keys and require two signatures or more. Okay, so we'll create our asset here. And so now we have a new asset. If we refresh our view here, we have our euro asset.
So that's it. That's all. You don't have to set up a whole new ledger for euros. You can just add euros to the same ledger.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one sequence ledger can manage multiple types of assets, and in fact, one account can actually hold multiple types of assets, as we saw, because Alice's account is holding both USD and points.
So she could also hold euros.
Yeah, she could also hold euros. I think what we'll do in this example is we'll think about creating a new type of account that is just like a euro account. So let's actually do that as our next step. Let's imagine that we want to create an account for Dave. And I'm going to do this manually in the dashboard, but this is the same action that was happening when you sign up. I'm going to create an account for Dave here, give Dave an alias. We're going to do a little something different here, which is we're going to say, okay, well, what currency is Dave going to operate on? Because right now, all the other accounts are operating on USD, but we're going to operate on euros here. And so, you know, this is going to tell our application actually when it looks at the account, oh, operate on euros, so don't show the USD symbol. We're going to show the euro symbol, and we can do that directly in the application. Keys, once again, we're going to use our consumer key. This is what all the consumer accounts are created from. Our code example is prepared on the right. Obviously, you could just set up your application here. You could copy this code and just put it directly into your application if you wanted to prototype your code with the interface here. But we'll go ahead and submit this here. Create Dave's account. And now we'll see that's a little bit different, right? We have our tag, which is currency euro.
Nice.
So let's actually switch over here. Let's create a new, let's get into Dave's account. And when we log into Dave's account, you'll notice something that's just a little bit different.
Right, so the euro symbol there, is that because you hard-coded that euro symbol into the app, or is that reading from the sequence ledger?
Yeah, so when we created the application, we basically said look at the account tag and look at the currency in the account tag, and that's what you should be operating on. So it's really easy to extend to different types of currencies just by creating a new account with a new currency tag in it. So the last thing I actually want to do is I want to show a transaction that actually moves multiple types of currencies. And so what we should do is, let's say that Alice wants to send some money to Dave. Now Alice has USD, Dave only accepts euros, so how do we accomplish that? Let's just double check how much Alice has. Okay, she has $52. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need the Super Wallet application to sit in the middle of this. So what I first want to do is, since we don't have any euros in the system, let's get some euros into the system. We're going to go to our Transactions tab, and we're going to create a new transaction. And similar to what we saw when Alice had deposited euros, we're going to do an issuance, but this is just a manual issuance.
So we're simulating Dave basically pulling money into his bank account?
No, we're going to simulate Super Wallet loading up some euro so that it can actually sit in the middle of the transaction.
Got it. So it's their balance sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Super Wallet's effectively going to play in this thing that we're brainstorming. Super Wallet's going to play currency exchange. Yeah, cool. Exactly. Cool. So let's give Super Wallet 1,000 euros. Remember, we've got to add 2 extra zeros for 1,000 euros. We'll put it into the Super Wallet account. And so this is our first issuance of our Super Wallet asset. When we submit this transaction, just to point out, the application's signing it with the treasury key, because that's the key we created this from. So we'll issue our 1,000 euros into Super Wallet account. And we'll have our new issuance transaction. If we go to our Super Wallet account and view the details and view our balances, we're actually going to see now that we have that balance.
So what are we looking at here? Just this is some sort of query that's showing me just what's in Super Wallet's account?
Yeah, exactly. So our query language that we saw previously on the transactions, we can use that here to say, show me all of the balances that are in the account alias of Super Wallet. And it's going to split these out by asset, basically different types of assets. And so we'll see that we have some USD. We have $1.30 that we've collected in fees from the previous checkouts that we did with ClickEats. And then exactly. And then we have our 1,000 euro that we just deposited. Now we have that euro available to us to actually do a foreign exchange transaction.
Just in case anyone was confused, the joke about the fees, that's not going to Sequence, that's going to Super Wallet.
That's going to Super Wallet.
Sequence doesn't charge for a software this way.
Yeah.
Okay, just to be clear.
Yep, Super Wallet is collecting the fees.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do our last transaction, our FX transaction. What we'll want to do is we'll want to create a new transaction. And this transaction is going to have 2 actions. Our first action is going to transfer USD from Alice to Super Wallet, and the second action is going to transfer euro from Super Wallet to Dave.
So we're going to model this in Sequence and actually run it instead of doing it in the SuperWallet app because we haven't built that part of the app yet.
Exactly. We haven't built the part of the SuperWallet app that would send a different currency.
So this is how you normally do application development, kind of model out what you're trying to do, and then later you can embed that functionality in the app.
Absolutely, and there will be a couple of tweaks to our application and the way that we use the SDK to enable this functionality.
All right, let's do it.
So we'll do our first part of this, which is we're going to take some USD, and we're going to take $20, so 20, 0, 0. We're going to take it from Alice's account, and we're going to put it into the SuperWallet account. And here we're actually just going to create this new type of tag here, or so this reference data called type, which is called FX. That will be helpful for us querying later. The next action we're going to do is transferring our euro. And this is where the SuperWallet application would actually do some type of, interpretation of what exchange rate they want to do. But let's say that they're going to give $18 for, or 1850 for 1850 euros for 20 USD. So we're going to transfer 1850 euros from the SuperWallet account to Dave's account, which we know can accept euros. We're going to add that same reference data. Type equals foreign exchange. And we've set up our transaction. We can look at it on the right to make sure everything's good. We've got our transfer of 20 USD from Alice to SuperWallet. Our type of action there is an FX. And then we have our second transfer of 1850 euro from SuperWallet to Dave. Okay, great. So we'll submit this transaction.
And before you submit it, this would only happen, this transaction would only actually execute and be appended if all the relevant keys in different systems signed off on it. So really what you're doing is you're sort of building it and requesting all the signatures, and then it'll get added. They won't see that because it happens seamlessly in the demo, but that's how it would normally happen.
Yep, so when we submit this transaction, there's actually 3 steps. There's build, sign, and submit. And so what's going to happen is we're going to build the transaction with these 2 actions. Since it moves funds out of Alice's account, which is at a consumer account, we got to sign it with the consumer key. And since it moves some funds out of the SuperWallet account, which was created from the treasury key, we got to sign it with the treasury key. So we're actually going to be signing this transaction with 2 keys. So we'll submit our transaction. And if we switch over to here, let's see here, our Alice, if we look at Alice's wallet back in SuperWallet, we're going to see that Alice has $20 less because she just paid Dave $20. And if we look at our transaction, we'll see her half of this transfer $20 of USD from Alice actually to SuperWallet, and we're interpreting this through to Dave. And if we switch to Dave's view, we can refresh here, and we can see that Alice paid you 1850 because he got the 1850 euro on his side. And that was all wrapped up in this tidy atomic transaction with 2 actions between these 3 parties. And so, just to reiterate that, this wallet application that we've been showing you, this was built over 3 days from just a couple of engineers, and we were able to build it so quickly because Sequence does all of the heavy lifting. The application didn't have to worry about storing balances, the transaction queries, any of the history, any of the different types of balance management. It was all handled by Sequence, and we were able to do a very lightweight integration at the application level.
That's awesome, Devon. Thank you for that demo. Let's sort of wrap up and reflect on what we just saw. So obviously we just looked at a mobile wallet, but you can use Sequence in any kind of application that is managing balances. So not just mobile wallets, but for asset managers, fundraising sites, exchanges, telecom platforms that are managing credits, gift and loyalty programs. So capital markets, payments, insurance, broadly speaking, any system or service that needs to manage balance and doesn't want to build custom ledger infrastructure and is not a good fit, say, for traditional core banking, this is really the sweet spot. And it's built for developers, and it's really those 4 things I mentioned before. It's a database for balances, it's a real-time transaction engine, It's a key-based authentication system and a golden record for reporting and analytics, and hopefully you saw that in the demo. So, to recap, Sequence allows teams to move fast and break nothing. You saw we were able to build a new feature live in just minutes, adding euros, and all of those ledger updates were secured by keys in the relevant systems. So it's really about basically getting to market more quickly at lower cost and with more robust security. And that's what we mean by a secure ledger service for managing balances and applications. As you saw, a single ledger handles multiple asset types. So you saw USD, Euro, loyalty points, but arbitrary asset types. So the days of kind of sub-ledgers per account or sub-ledgers per asset and having to manage and link all those different tables together, I think those days are behind us. We saw that keys manage both access to the ledger as well as directly authenticate transactions in that build, sign, submit process that Devon referred to. And hopefully you saw how easy it was to build with Sequence, and operating and adding new features is also much easier because it's a managed service. So the point of all this, let's let teams focus on building their product instead of managing complex ledger infrastructure. So where do you go from here? Well, the first thing is we want to invite everyone who's listening to this to sign up for free at Sequence, which is seq.com. So right now, there's a developer preview of Sequence that's available, and there are already several dozen teams building today with Sequence, and I wanted to encourage everyone to reach out directly to us if you're building with Sequence. And the reason for that is we have a great support and product solutions team that can work with you to do the basic solution design and architecture of your system. So there's great documentation. There's 4 different examples, including the example you saw today on the Sequence documentation and website. But we would encourage you to reach out to us directly. And by the way, general availability with production security for keys is available in Q1. So now is the time to start building and doing development if you want to be slated for that production availability in Q1. So as a next step, I want to encourage you to do a few things. First of all, reach out to us. You can send an email to support@seq.com. That will go directly to us, and we'll be able to put you in touch with the solutions team to work with you on your application or just to learn more. Of course, you can also go directly to our homepage at seq.com, which will have more information about everything, the product, the company, the service. You can see the underlying code for the example that we ran today, specifically the implementation code on Sequence in the docs. If you go and look at the mobile wallet example, and the URL is there. And then finally, we've recorded this, we think, and we're going to post it a little bit later today, and make sure that if you want to rewatch it or you want to share it with colleagues, you're able to. The easiest way just to track us and to track what we're doing and see more things like this is just to follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/chain. So with that, thank you very much. It was great to present Sequence to you all today, and we would be delighted to hear more about what you're building and to help you move quickly, break nothing, and transform financial services. So thanks, everybody, and see you next time. Bye-bye.